Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Faithless Forrest.
And I'm Joe Barnhart. I want to welcome you. And if you do or don't believe in a deity or a God, you are welcome, because this is an open discussion, and it's sponsored by people who don't believe in the supernatural, but rather have a naturalistic view of the universe. And so it's free-thinking agnostics and atheists, and a show for people like that, but for other people who want to interact with us and talk about these beliefs.
All right, today's topic is whence suffering and evil.
Suffering and evil, I want to tell you a little about the sponsors of the program. The Atheist Society of Knoxville has a fun-together meeting at a bar or eatery, and it's at Barley's in the Old City downtown at 5:30 today.
All right, it'll be starting before the show is over.
And it's look for a book called The God Delusion, Standing Upright. And if you come to talk and be entertained, and then to interact in the discussion. Don't punch or preach, just come and interact and have a good time.
All right. The Rationalists of East Tennessee have several regular monthly meetings. The first and third Sunday mornings of most months are lectures with lively roundtable discussions. These are held in the cafeteria annex of the Goins building at the Pellissippi State Technical Community College. Programs start at 10:30, but come early for coffee and conversation. On the second Sunday of most months, we have the Skeptics Book Club. On the fourth Sunday, we're alternating sometimes with a potluck get-together we call Reflections, and sometimes we are doing some board games or similar activities.
Okay, and you can see our number on the screen, or phone number, and later in the website you can consult our additional details about times and locations.
All right. Do we have anything in the news to comment on? I didn't bring anything.
No, we've got so much material. Well, there are all kinds of good news out, but
all right.
When we get into, go ahead, you have something there.
Well, I guess we'll mention this after the mid-program break as well, but there is an unusual event coming up in July. We won't be having the Rationalists of East Tennessee will not be having the first Sunday get-together. Instead, there's going to be a weekend-long advance. This is not a retreat, it's an advance because we're forward-thinking. So the Rational of East Tennessee will hold a free thought in the foothills of the Smoky Mountains, actually in Townsend, from July 3rd and 4th. There's meals are a la carte. There's lodging available at the Tremont Lodge and Resort. There will be guest speakers, as well as I guess a free thought Jeopardy, and of course it's the 4th of July weekend, so there'll be fireworks after to enjoy.
Good.
This is a fee event, and further details can be found on the rationalists.org website, or call our member and sometimes host of this program, Alita Ledendecker. Contact her at ALEDENDECKER@me.com. We'll repeat that again in the mid-program break if you didn't have time to get out something with which to write.
Okay.
So, Joe, whence suffering and evil?
Okay. Now, the problem of suffering and evil, sometimes it's called the problem of theodicy.
Theodicy.
And if we are taking an empirical approach, then I have to say, well, there are all kinds of sources of suffering and evil.
All right.
All kinds. If you're dealing with it from a theistic point of view, it poses a severe problem if you hold to the traditional view of a deity as omnipotent, all-powerful, and omniscient, all-knowing, and loving.
And loving.
If you put all of those three together, and then you have an enormous amount of suffering and evil in the world, then how can they be rationally explained? And you have a lot of that problem just in the Bible alone, let alone to say what theologians have dealt with. Mm-hmm. The book of Job, of course, is devoted to that. But after that, you had some very profound thinkers trying to work with it. E.S. Brightman, Sheffield Brightman. E.S. Brightman is one of the ones that I think did the most profound work on this from a theistic point of view. And Whitehead.
When you say theistic, though, I assume there's a hidden assumption there, and that would be a Judeo-Christian.
Doesn't necessarily have to be Judeo-Christian, but a monotheistic view, yeah.
So that was actually what I was thinking we needed to probe, and that is, it seems like this is a problem that monotheism has that polytheism doesn't.
Well, polytheism simply already has conflict among the gods.
Because there is more than one God, there can be more than one, and they can contest with one another.
And apparently not even Jupiter functions, or Zeus, as omnipotent. By the time he's got all of these other deities to deal with, he's got a whole committee. And if you know what it's like to be chairman of a committee.
And sometimes they will thwart his will.
Of course, yeah. And of course, in Hebrew thinking, later Hebrew thinking, you had the concept of a Satan developing. We talked a little bit about that. The original translation is not even a translation. It just literally means the adversary.
The adversary. And where would that appear? Meaning, I don't think that's the snake in the Genesis story.
No, it's in the first...
Let me qualify that further. Within the constraint of the Old Testament only.
Right, that's it. That's right.
Yeah. It's not the snake.
This Satan, or the adversary, as a personal being, appears apparently quite early in the book of Job. But and we mentioned this earlier, he is there among, quote, the sons of God as the prosecuting attorney. And then later on, in around 300, after the Babylonian captivity of 586, the rabbis suffered intellectually about this problem, and they developed this Son of God notion as a kind of semi-angelic being who got a lot of power. And then there got to be a rivalry among the supernatural angels.
All right.
And of course, Milton, centuries later, developed Paradise Lost and developed that theme. He did a marvelous psychological study of envy in the process.
Okay.
And
I've never read Paradise Lost.
That's a great piece of poetry, just absolutely marvelous. You know, whatever you think of the theology, it's amazing psychology.
Mm-hmm. All right.
The guy was a genius, there's no question.
All right, so at the risk of me not keeping up here, what you're saying is that, in a sense, the first time the adversary appears is Job, and when I read Job, I get this idea that, you know, it's almost like one of the deity's underlings is saying, you know, he looks so happy now, but, you know, it's only because you've given him...
That's what the story's about, yeah.
And he's essentially trying to goad the deity into... Actually, perhaps he's trying to attack the self-image of the deity.
That's right.
It almost sounds like.
Yeah, it is interesting what the writer was trying to do. And he was trying to deal dramatically with the problem of suffering. And and this was of course, he was in a world by then. These are Hebrews interacting with the Greek world.
The Greek had become quite dominant around the Mediterranean.
Yeah, they all been Hellenized.
I assume there were Greek colonies
well, the Greeks simply had not only colonies, but the language was pervasive, and so even the rabbis knew Greek.
Maybe I should ask, where can you place this on a timeline with the conquest of Alexander the Great?
Well, it's about, that's, what is that, 322?
I think it's a little earlier, because I think he died in like 330 something, so it would be like 340s maybe.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe.
But anyhow,
Scholars, tell us where I'm wrong.
anyhow, in the early part of the 4th century, the Greek world started expanding.
Well, apparently I got my wish.
Good, let's go. We got a caller. Call in, help us out.
Give us a name or nickname, please.
It's Al.
Hello, Al.
Go, Al. Let's hear what you got. Go.
Well, I just want to tell you that your show is bent on just bashing Christians, the Bible, and Christianity, and it's not about atheism at all. Why don't you preach about it and teach people what atheism is all about?
Okay.
Why don't you stay on your subject and get off of mine?
Okay, thank you. Now, atheism is built on the word theism. He apparently forgot that.
Yeah, apparently.
But anyhow, atheism is a naturalistic viewpoint.
Yes, and in fact we are trying to examine all of this as a natural phenomena, which is
and furthermore,
human beliefs.
unlike our understanding of this, a naturalistic viewpoint means you understand religion from a naturalistic point of view. So unfortunately didn't understand that part of our job is to understand Hinduism the best we can, Buddhism, early versions of Christianity, and the Hebrew religion from a strictly naturalistic point of view. Now we're trying to deal with the suffering of evil, and part of this, what we're trying to do, is to show how those in those viewpoints tried to deal with the problem. In that sense, we are more like anthropologists than our caller. We're trying to get inside the heads of people different from us, but they are still human beings who are thinking.
And what's more is, as human beings ourselves, we are interested in the thoughts of other human beings.
We're humanists. There are Christian humanists, and there are Jewish humanists, and there are atheist humanists. And we're alike in that respect. We're trying to understand each other.
So you didn't mention one ancient culture that I have quite a bit of enthusiasm for, and that is the ancient Egyptians.
Yeah.
You know, they, once again, they don't have the problem of evil because they're polytheistic, and so therefore we can have gods that contend.
Yeah.
But they have a delightfully positive outlook on life.
Yeah. Well, those who did the writing did. But you've got to...
When I say that, their writings, some of their writings would be temple writings that are meant to be ceremonial, and some of them would have been read during public ceremonies. And there's an aspect that I think modern people misunderstand about Egyptian, because we see an awful lot of funerary remains. So it looks like it's a death cult, but it is the opposite. It is a love of life.
Yeah.
And an attempt to say, let's preserve this as best we can.
Yeah.
It is the opposite of death
You
cult.
got to be... All cultures have had to deal with the problem of death. And not only the process of dying, but then once you're dead, then what? Now, if you're a survivor of your relative dying, then that means you've got to make some adaptations to their leaving. Now, we do know that there's a tendency when a husband dies, and then it's not too long, and that the wife dies. Now, I think the better explanation is, especially if both of them are old.
That would have something to do with it.
I think that's more likely.
Yes.
But it is also, if you've lived with someone for many, many, many years, it's an incredible loss.
Yeah.
And so the impact...
some of self is lost.
Yes,
I can see that.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, because all our self-identity is tied up with the identity of other people.
Mm-hmm.
And if we simply lived alone, we wouldn't have much of a self-identity, because it's part of a self-identity is to be interacting with other people.
All right. So, to slide back into Judeo-Christian theology, I guess we were discussing the enemy that shows up in Job, and I'm guessing there was a point you were going to make, and let's try and return to that path.
Okay, well, what happens is they begin to realize that if you've got gradually a deity becoming more and more omnipotent. Now, in the book of Genesis, he seems to be walking in the garden saying, Adam, where are you? That's not very omniscient.
Yeah.
But as it developed, the thinking gets to be, he is made to be omniscient, all-knowing.
Yes.
And all-powerful, and all good. And yet, nevertheless, there is an enormous amount of suffering in the world.
No, as you said, all good. I had me stopping to think about not merely Job, the book of Job, but wouldn't there be other places where, that evil is brought by the deity, and so I don't think that the early Jews would have said he's all good. I think that's a Christian point you're making, perhaps.
In fact, you got a really good point. Is the notion of a deity itself evolved?
Right.
In fact,
I'll go with that.
In fact, it is Billy Graham's teacher, Gordon Clark, who says God creates both good and evil. He's quoting from, of course, the Bible.
It's like Isaiah 47, verse 7.
His point is that he is in complete control of everything. And this particular teacher, unlike Al, our caller, I'm happy to say, Al is not a Calvinist, and I want to make that clear. He is not a predestinationist the way Gordon Clark is. But Gordon Clark says that God creates good and evil, including causing people to sin. And in other words, he's in complete control. Now, other Christians have evolved other views.
Man, if he was here, I would say, what's the point of that, then?
Well, that's a good
How
point.
would he answer that?
I think his answer is the whole purpose is to manifest his glory. Now, this seems to be absolute egomania.
I'm going to say, I don't want to watch that show.
Well, I think that's...
I'd walk out of that theater.
Yeah, well, I think to be fair to other Christian believers and Jewish believers, they're not all in that stripe. So you don't want to... What I'm trying to show, and I think you too, is that all views, both in science and social sciences and theology and religion, all of these views have to modify and develop. When they run into problems, we have to revise our thinking. And what we're trying to do, from a naturalistic point of view, is to show how this happens even in theology. And we've got another caller coming in. Go ahead.
Hello, caller. Give us a name or a nickname.
Caller is fine.
Hello, caller.
Go ahead.
And caller, our topic today is whence suffering. You have something for that or something else we said?
Well, whence suffering sounds okay, and you mentioned Job, but I had a slightly different take on Job.
Go.
From what I understand, the incident of Job resulted because God and Satan were gambling, betting, much like anybody else in a bar might bet about any particular thing that they want to bet about. In this case, Satan says, well, he wouldn't worship you if, you weren't doing things for him, and God says, fine, you're on. Let's go ahead and see, let's bet. I bet he doesn't, make his life miserable. So is that not at least reasonable in the story?
I think you could say this. It turns out to look very much like a bet. Now, whether or not the author put that inside the heads of these thinkers, that's not clear in the text.
Yeah, I don't remember anything particularly being waged over. It's not
Well,
like...
as I understand it, money did not change hands, but sometimes a bet involves, well, you got to shave your mustache or something like that. So I would look at it as a bet. But taking that back to your...
Go ahead. Uh-huh.
Taking that back to your today's subject, from whence evil, well, from whence means from where.
Good.
And so in this case, we would have to say that whatever evil befell Job came from God.
Well, that was a big problem that they had. If God is the source of everything, then did he know, for example, before creation?
No, I'm not taking it into that sort of realm. I'm talking about this particular case, Job. His suffering was caused by God.
Now, caller, I have to contest that a little bit. Here I'll be, I don't know, am I defending Yahweh or defending the adversary? The devil did, or the adversary did kill his children.
Well, just a second now.
No. He's got to...
Yes, he did kill children. He killed wives. I believe he killed slaves, too. But the whole problem is that the devil was not able to do that had not God said, go do it.
Well put. Yeah.
Now, as I read
As a matter of fact, I know of no place in the Bible where Satan killed anyone. Nor do I know of any place in the Bible where Satan lied. As a matter of fact, everybody, all these religions say Satan is a liar and a killer and all of this. That does not appear to be the case.
Well, part of that is because Satan isn't given that big a role when you think about it. But your point is well taken, I think, is this. But don't let me put words in your mouth. I think your point is, after all, the deity who was supposed to be omnipotent and omniscient, he could have locked up this Satan, this adversary, or he could have said, well, the bet is not on. He participated in the suffering of Job, I think is the point you're making.
Well, but I think the point that I'd like to get around to is this.
Go ahead.
And that is, if you are a God, as it says in the Bible, that
Go ahead.
Man is to God as insects are to a man. Therefore, if it be his pleasure that, well, or like you, stomp on an anthill, that's totally your pleasure because you're God, and anything that you do is okay and righteous.
Okay.
Simply because of the definition that you are God.
Okay, here's my problem with what you're doing. I don't like to extend an argument beyond what they say.
Okay.
Now, here's a point. In the book of Genesis, it says that human beings are created in the image of God. That's far from saying they're just insects. Now, if you can, quote me the passage you were quoting.
Oh, my. Well, it would take a little bit to look up.
Yeah, but I think you might be mistaken on this, thinking that's putting that into the mouth of Yahweh.
Okay, now I feel awfully motivated to look it up.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. I don't think I misrepresented your view, but you can check me.
Well,
wait a minute. Let me give you what I was saying, and then you disagree.
Sure.
Then you disagree with me.
I wasn't disagreeing with you yet, but go ahead.
Yeah, hear what the view is first. It works better that way.
Okay.
Okay. Now, I think you're saying that in reading the book of Job, it seems as if you got to admit that the deity does have some serious responsibility for the suffering of these human beings.
I can get behind that.
Okay, and I think we are in agreement on that, and that's why it is a problem of suffering and evil.
Okay.
If the deity is good and loving and caring, then how to... Now, the fact that Job, at the end of the story, turns out okay is not a sufficient answer, because, after all, a lot of people got ill and sick and slaughtered in the process. And that's called the means does not justify, or the end does not justify the means. And I think we would condemn communists on that basis.
All right. However,
Go ahead.
I'd like to also add this. You've just inspired the idea.
Uh-huh.
When Job was asking God, why did you allow all these things to be done to me? And basically God told him, it's none of your business. Is that not true?
Well, if you've got the passage on that, let me hear it.
Okay. Well, I do recall that you were curious.
What's your first name now again?
Caller is fine.
Okay, Caller is not one of the books in the Bible.
Oh, excuse me? I thought you asked my name. My mistake.
Okay.
But
That's okay.
But if I'm not mistaken, that was God's response. It's really none of your business. Where were you when I made the mountains and the oceans? Where were you? You know, you're nothing.
I think what he's showing here is a point. He's not being rude in that story. The author is trying to show this, that it's such an overwhelming theory of divine omnipotence that there's no way for a human being, he's trying to say, to understand it. Now, I think he's wrong in this, but I think, to be fair to the author, he's saying it's such a big problem, it's beyond human understanding.
I see. Well, maybe I have the book of Job just all kinds of wrong, because from what I understood, Job was standing upon his righteousness, that he was a terribly, terribly righteous man, and therefore would not deserve any of the suffering that God heaped upon Israel and anyone else he wanted to heap suffering upon.
We're in perfect agreement on that. Yeah.
All right, so that was Job's defense. I'm sinless. Why are you doing all this nonsense to me?
Yeah.
And then,
Teachers, I have a question here. Maybe the caller can help me. What does righteous mean, caller?
you mean, define righteous? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as far as I know, I've seemed to be concerned with the Bible, is righteous is whatever God says it is. Period. There's no definition. There's no gray area. If God says it's righteous.
Joe, how might you define righteous if a student asks you?
I don't define things. I have an agreement with Webster.
I'm talking to my co-host here, Joe. I
Oh,
see you on the computer right now.
Okay. Well, I don't want to get off into definitions that you can go ad infinitum on this. I mean, the word righteous is just building the word right. And you got right action, and a righteous man a righteous woman engages in right behavior. But then, of course, you can get into all kinds of debates as to what right behavior is and where it comes from. Well, and that's a whole other program.
Is it right because it's moral, or is it right because it's force? I guess we're back to command theory versus...
It is relevant, but I'm going to thank the caller for calling in. I want to get back to our thank you again for calling in and get back to our topic. He helped us get on the book of Job, which is wrestling with this problem of suffering so much. Mm-hmm. And Job, and the caller is right, Job in the end says, I am a righteous man. So how do you explain this? And it seems to me the beauty of the book of Job is he opens up the door so that later other people can deal with the question. It's not solved in the book of Job. To simply say, well, Job in the end gets, he's back now in the good shape. He's not.
When I read Job, I was very confused because I thought the whole point was that Job was going to be so faithful to the deity he wouldn't complain. But he does complain.
Yeah.
And then at the end, he gets rewarded, even though he wasn't true to what I think the bet, so to speak, was all about. It's like the story. Actually, it almost felt like there must have been multiple authors to the story, and they hadn't read each other's work entirely.
Here's the beauty of the book of Job, and some of these rabbis were cleverer than we like to think, is they can do theology by telling stories and then drop the story and you figure it out. See, in other words, the story raises the questions so that you cannot go back before the story the way you used to.
Okay, all right. It's meant to.
It's a great literary device.
It's meant to make us feel the problem in a personal way.
Exactly.
Because yes, you read that story and you've kind of lived through the experience that Job had.
Now here's one of the traditional views that was used at this time is that God is angry because people have sinned, and so suffering comes as punishment. That's a major theme throughout the Hebrew Bible.
All right, yes.
It's a major, and the book of Job is simply challenging this.
I was about to say it's an exception, but you agreed with me. All right.
Okay, here's a caller. Go ahead, caller.
Please give us a name or a nickname so that we know how to address you.
Go ahead. Sam, go ahead.
Yes, on the question of suffering, I remember the verse in the Bible that said God had sent his son or caused him to be killed on the cross for the remission of sins. And as far as evil is concerned, in regard to relief of that suffering, I was wondering if God had killed Lucifer or had him killed, then we could have saved ourselves an awful lot of trouble here. So I was wondering why that didn't happen.
It's got a good point. Got a good point.
That would leave us with all the questions unresolved. The only way to keep the priests in business and keep the rams and sheep being brought for them to slaughter and partake thereof is to keep the question open.
But he's got a good point, and it's a very subtle point. If God is omnipotent, then why would, and I think your point is, but don't let me change your view. I think you're saying, why would he shuttle this off to Satan when he's supposed to be in charge in the first place? And make Satan the scapegoat. Even if he put Satan out to do some harm, your view is he could have said, enough is enough, let's lock him up and have a better world.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a good point. And the Satan theory was brought in, it seems to me, as a spin-off of the theory of omnipotence. He was trying to say God's in control and he's good, but since he is in control, he created this other being who is now doing so much evil, and he's keeping him alive. Now that's your point. Why is he keeping him alive? We don't keep criminals alive and not locked up if they continue to do this kind of evil. We put them away. At least we put them behind bars. But why did the deity not do this is your question, if I'm understanding. And the trouble with your question is very sensible.
Yes. You know, caller, I'm not sure about your name. Did you say Sam?
Yeah, he did.
No.
Oh.
Dale. D-A-L-E.
Okay, Dale.
Oh, well, I misunderstood you. Sorry.
So, Dale, I think one of the strongest challenges I've ever heard to really doing what you're supposed to do per Jesus, which is, turn the other cheek and love your enemy, is the assertion that Christians should pray for the redemption of the devil. And that seems a very powerful argument that wouldn't that really fix everything? And if God can reveal himself and fix even these sinners on earth, and if apparently God does that, I've heard people testify to that effect, why doesn't he do that for Satan?
Well, if he did, it'd ruin the whole theory in the first place.
Well,
but it's a sensible question.
Yes, and it seems to be the way that actually fixes it for everybody. Everybody, even Satan's now a good guy.
This, by the way, is rational thinking that you can see taking place in physics. You have a theory, and then you project the theory into other areas, and lo and behold, you run into a problem. And so you have to modify your original theory. And the old word atom meant uncut.
Yes.
But they now split it.
Yes.
Because the theory just didn't work enough.
But we already had enough books published about the properties of it, so we had to extend it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, Dale, do you have any more comments or questions for us?
No.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you for calling. And are you local? And have you watched before?
Yes.
Yeah, I recognize the voice.
All right. Thanks again for calling.
Thank you, Dale.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, Joe, we've come past the midpoint here. Maybe we should do the midpoint break here. So, viewers, in case you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by them and by individual contributions. Shows are live most Tuesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. here on Community Access Television channels 12 or 194, depending upon your local cable network. Tell your out-of-town friends they can see us streaming online at CTV KNOX. And by the way, we got a report, I think last week and the week before, that the streaming wasn't working real well. If you're watching online streaming, and if it's working well, call in and let us know. All right, Joe?
Okay, it's a call-in show, and we're live, so let's move on to our program.
Well, we got the mid-program video here. Sam, are you ready to roll it? I wasn't sure if we were being told we didn't have it.
Oh, okay, let's move on.
In or around the Knoxville area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else? Well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun. Do you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org. If you live...
All right, well, we're back.
We're back?
Yep. I want to cover this event the Rationalists of East Tennessee are doing. They're holding a free thought event in the foothills of the Smoky Mountains in Townsend. This is July 3rd and 4th. There is a ticket cost. It's $120 per person. Children 18 and under are free. Meals are a la carte at an additional fee. Lodging at the Advance is at Tremont Lodge and Resort. This includes a list of speakers who are confirmed and more to come, as well as Free Thought Jeopardy. And then, of course, it's a 4th of July weekend. There'll be fireworks after the fact. So in the past, there have been these regional picnics where freethinkers from Georgia, the Carolinas, have come. This is kind of a substitute for it.
Okay. We've got a caller.
And we've got a call again.
Okay, go ahead.
Caller, give us a name or a nickname, please.
Go ahead.
Hello, I think I heard Jeremy. Jeremy, give us a comment or a question, please.
Well, this whole thing is where does suffering and evil come from?
how you define evil.
Okay, sure, it's a simple question.
Fair question.
It is a
That's
fair
the heart of
question,
it.
yeah.
Joe, you want to have a go at it?
Yeah, and I don't want to make it real super duper. Evil, in just an ordinary context, means that we have a need for pain and happiness, and evil is sustained contradiction to our goodness and our happiness. In other words, we're suffering so much. And why are we suffering so much? And it seems to be overwhelming, and that's why it's called the problem of evil. And now that sounds like a problem of its own, because usually the word evil means somebody caused it. And in some respects, if you got an omnipotent God, it is a question, why isn't something being done about it? And that's why it's called the problem of evil.
Jeremy, would you care to offer us any alternative definition? Do you have something you like?
Since I'm defining evil based on what God says evil is. I mean, if he gets to define good and evil how he wants to. I mean, if you create your own universe, you can decide what's good and evil in it.
Okay, go ahead. Now, the meaning of the words, the way people are using it, and it has to be in context, okay? And you have to, I think you agree, even human beings it's human beings who are interpreting what they regard as the Word of God, okay?
What I'm asking really is not so much what God says, but how do you define good and evil without a supernatural being, without God? Because you clearly have a concept of it.
Okay, now...
How do you change that definition without a God telling you?
I thought I just did. Did you disagree?
No. I want
Okay.
you to give the definition. I wonder how you came to that conclusion idea without a God. How you come to the conclusion that that's how evil's defined.
Okay, I don't think you have to have a theological dictionary just to have definitions of words, like the word hope or the word jump. You don't have to have a theological...
I know. I'm asking how you got to that conclusion.
Well, okay, I'll explain it again. Maybe I need to make it clearer.
Okay.
It's, when I was a kid, or when you were a kid, I went barefooted a lot, and I stuck my toe a lot. And that's pain. My mother died when I had just turned 18. That's pain and suffering. I watched her go from about 130 pounds to about 102 pounds. And that's suffering on her part and suffering on the part of her children. I was the oldest, so I watched the younger ones suffer, and my father suffered enormously. And that's what's called the problem of suffering and evil. This was a good woman dying at the age of 41, and that's what I call evil, in the sense of something happens that is not fulfilling, and it doesn't contribute to goodness.
Well, it doesn't contribute to your goodness.
Okay.
It's not fulfilling to you.
Okay, let me ask you this. Now, you're an evangelical Christian, right?
I'm a Christian. I'm not evangelical. I don't know.
Do you believe in hell?
Yes.
Okay. Now, millions of people will go to hell, right?
I believe there will be some people there. I couldn't sleep enough. I didn't think people like Adolf Hitler got what was coming to them, you know?
Okay, now, with your concept of revenge, you want Hitler to suffer forever and ever and ever, right? That's the kind of person you are?
Well, I want justice.
Let me ask my question again. Is it the kind of person you are, you want him to suffer forever and ever and ever and never be relieved of it? Is that the kind of person you are?
Not necessarily.
Good. And I don't want to project that notion onto a deity either. If I hold to a God, I wouldn't want him to be that either. And therefore, the notion of hell is immoral from my point of view.
Well, my point of view is that if you're God, you create the universe, you decide what's good and evil in it and what's moral and what's not. So it's not my place to decide. If I create my own universe, I'll get to decide what's good and evil in it.
Okay, now, I think you're saying to me, if I'm understanding you, might makes right.
Well, yeah, where do you think government comes from? It comes from the barrel of the gun. People use force to coerce people to do things. That's how government works. That's how everything.
Okay, then you and I then clearly know where we differ, okay? Because I do not think might makes right.
Well, where does right come from then?
It comes from people who have desires and wants and want to try to live together peacefully and happily. And so they come up with morality to try to make life more enjoyable. Not because some powerful being imposes a definition to manifest his own ego.
Well, that's your opinion of God then.
Well,
I think Joe's opinion is independent of a God. Joe's opinion...
What I'm saying, if I'm understanding the view you're telling me with the hell, I think I'm giving you what I think is your God, not my interpretation of what a God would be if he were decent. But if you like eternal suffering, if you think that's a good thing, then you and I know where we differ. I think you need to be converted.
Well, see, I think there needs to be justice, and I'm not qualified to determine what is a just punishment for a crime.
Okay, but you're agreeing that Adolf Hitler should suffer forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, and create for Hitler more suffering than he created on earth.
If God thinks that's just, it's fine with me.
Okay, now what I'm saying to you is you are an atheist of type 2. See, what I'm arguing with you is this, see what you think. If you're going to have a God, he's got to have elementary decency and not just power. Otherwise, it's not a God. It's just raw power that you've elevated and somehow worship. But I don't worship just raw power. I consider that to be immoral and obscene.
Well, when you create your own universe, you can set your own world the way.
Well, see, what I'm suggesting to you, you've created your own religion and call it God. So I'm saying you are the creator of this evil system, and that's why I'm saying...
Well, I'm just going by the Bible.
Well, let me speak here, because I'm the non-believer here, lifelong.
Go ahead.
And, so Jeremy, I don't think there is a God, and I think we have to therefore come up with answers. We got to identify questions and come up with answers on our own. And so to me, the question of evil turns into one of, well, as Joe said earlier, perhaps I stubbed my toe and that's not good. That's a physiological experience I have, and I can have others, some of which are good and some of which are bad. I don't need a supernatural being to tell me that my pain is evil. Do you think you need a supernatural being, Jeremy, to tell you that your pain is evil?
Suffering and evil aren't necessarily the same thing. I know it's suffering, but I don't know it's necessarily evil.
Well, let me extend that. The other people define it differently, but I've said I think there are two kinds of evil in the world. There's a kind of evil that is nature is just indifferent to us, and we lose heat, we have to eat, and there's no maliciousness in nature. But if we don't, take guard against, running out of food and energy, we die, and that process is not pleasant. There's another kind of evil, and that's the evil of malicious humans who do things. It almost sickens me to say these things out loud, that there are humans that'll set a cat on fire. I love kitties, and so that's appalling to me.
Too. That's something we can all agree on. I love cats.
Very good.
But that kind of evil is rather different than merely starving to death. Starving to death is just running out of a way to maintain life. So there's two different kinds.
So that first kind you're talking about of starving to death or something, that's suffering, but that's not necessarily evil.
Okay,
it is.
It's got a good point.
There isn't the intention. That is why I distinguish between
that's
the two.
a good point.
One has intention, the other does not. But I don't see that the universe has any intention with respect to us, and therefore there is nothing that deserves to be called a deity.
Okay, now let's say that, don't leave us, caller, because I think you're making a good point. And I think we need to deal with it. Usually when we use, in ordinary context, we often use the word evil to mean some conscious being intended to do harm.
That's what it is.
Okay, now, in that context, now, what you need to recognize is that some people use the word evil in a different context. Now, you may not do it, but other people do, and my job is to try to understand how people use the word, not telling them how they should use it.
Okay.
Okay. Do you understand now how people are using the word differently from you?
Okay, I understand what disagreement is. You have a different definition of evil. In addition to what I'm using, you have another definition.
That's okay. See, what we can do here then, say, okay, we got different definitions, and your definition makes a lot of sense. I'm just saying other people have used this word in this way, and I have to go along with it because I want to communicate with them. You understand?
Okay.
Now, I am saying, on your view of God or part of it, with the eternal hell of tormenting people forever and ever, I would regard that as evil. And therefore, that's why I would say you're an atheist. From that point of view, your God's not good enough to be called a God. You see what I'm saying? Now, you may differ with me, but at least you can understand my point of view.
That's your point of view. I disagree, but I understand it.
Okay, that's good enough. That's fair enough.
All right. Jeremy, may we ask, have you watched the show before, and are you local?
I'm a local. I live in Knoxville, and I've watched the show a couple of times.
I'm actually thinking I remember your voice. Have you called before?
Yeah, a long while ago.
Where'd you go to high school?
Gibbs.
Gibbs. I went to old Knoxville High. Well, that's where probably your grandfather went.
All right. Jeremy, I want to thank you for calling in. I know Joe wants to talk a little more here. He's got a book open. So let's say thank you and return to our program, and we look forward to future calls.
Well, thank you very much. And I hope Brother Al is still listening, because he brought up a good point last time that we didn't get to deal with too much on the problem of values. Now, he called in and rather strongly said my view was wrong. and that's okay, because that's what a good dialogue is. But I think I had a good point, and I think he had a good point. And on the next program, we want to deal with the question of values, and we're going to bring somebody else in to help us. And I'm going to borrow some of Brother Al's point of view. If I understood what he was saying, is if you have a value, somebody else has to want something. You have to tell them what the value is, and that makes sense too.
All right.
But we use the word. So what we're trying to learn in this program is words and meanings have contexts.
Yes.
And so we have to find out how the words are used in the context, and then go along with the contexts, so that we can communicate. Now, out of this may develop theories that the definition doesn't necessarily dictate the theory. That's too simple.
All right. Well, Joe, we've only got 6 minutes left, and I know you wanted to move beyond Job, and do we want to get into the Thucydides at this point?
Yeah, Thucydides was a guy who saw the Greeks with their gods having to explain wars among themselves. And like the Hebrews, they thought their God, you had the God of Israel, and he was fighting over here against the Assyrians and so forth. And the Greeks had the same kind of thinking. They had their gods, and they were fighting each other, and that's how they explain sometimes the evil of defeat.
And certainly Homer's stories about the battle at Troy was laced with gods. But Thucydides is a break from that, I guess.
Yes.
So let me read this part here. The gods take a hand in directing and undermining human action. Mm-hmm. Throughout his work, Thucydides draws attention to the difference between his work and the poets. They told pleasant stories. He tells the truth. His older contemporary, Herodotus,
yeah,
who wrote up the Persian Wars, included many tales involving divine interventions and expressed none of the skepticism that we find in Thucydides. Mm-hmm. Thucydides worked from an empirical theory of human behavior that furnished explanation for the sorts of events that pious people attributed to gods. He was the first European to write of human events making no reference to divine intervention. His is thus a kind of atheism by displacement. Naturalistic explanations leave no role for the gods. Quietly drop altogether out of the human story. So what is the name of Thucydides' work?
I can't remember now. I'd have to look it up.
But it is also a history of the Peloponnesian War, is it not? Or is it a history... I said it wrong. I thought... I was going to say it was a history of the Persian War, or is it a history of the Peloponnesian War? It's perhaps the history of the Peloponnesian War.
Yeah, and I'm not good in bibliography, so I wouldn't be of any help.
All right. I should have warned you I was asking this question, and you could have warned me not to.
But I would have to look it up. Because it's a good question. I'm not good in bibliography.
Yeah, I believe it was during the Peloponnesian Wars when the Greeks were fighting amongst themselves. After they defeated
his point is that if you're going to have one God explaining the victory, then you got another God, then this God just couldn't do the job. So you have the problem of omnipotence being challenged among the Greeks. The Greeks didn't develop a notion of omnipotence, except they tried to flirt with the notion with Jupiter or Zeus.
Zeus for the Greeks.
And then the Jupiter for the Romans.
Yeah. And they sort of implied that he became the chief god simply because of strength. It was a might makes right kind of thing.
And you have in the Hebrew Bible, you have a council that God has, as if he's got archangels. It's almost a borrowing from the Greeks then. And you reduce some of the gods to archangels and angels. And so God's still he's the CEO of heaven.
So I guess with Thucydides here, we have a birth of something that is also something more like objective history.
Well, it's another viewpoint, at least. He's trying to say the theory of the gods is not solving the problem. And so let's simply try to say that approach just doesn't work anymore, and let's try an altogether different approach and try to deal with the problem of suffering and the problem of explanation of defeat in war without the gods. And by the way, I wanted to bring up a question before we leave.
We've only got a minute or so.
There is a problem is that often among early believers is this: why is the sexual urge so young?
All right.
It's too much.
We're having to change the subject with not much time.
Yeah, well, there's still a problem with suffering, and we'll deal with that in the next in the next time when we're here Tuesday, because we're going to take the challenge of Brother Al, because he had a good point. Is what are values, and we're going to, and where do they come from, and we're going to try to deal with that in a somewhat structured way, and then try to say, well, we do have values, but then they're conflicting values.
And in adolescence, we're struggling to learn how to deal with that.
Yeah. And you can see evolving values because they come into conflict with other values and with the real physical world.
All right.
Okay, we've got to end up.
Well, so it's time to start wrapping things up. If you want to contact us before the next show, get out your pen and paper and write down our contact information. This has been Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Faithless Forrest.
And I'm Joe Barnhart, Freethought Forum at yahoo.com.
You can call and leave voicemail at 865-272-9060.
And we want to thank our viewers. I want to thank Sam here with us.
And Jonas for screening the calls. Please visit our websites, rationalists.org and knoxvilleatheist.org. Nuns are the fastest growing religious demographic in America. And right here in East Tennessee, you can find us at ASK and